Dogman thought my moose costume was real. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I don't know if you might want to save this next one for your Halloween show or something, because it happened in October, but I've been thinking about it lately for some reason. I just can't get it off my mind, and it's gotten me into this mood where I need to finally write it all down. These events happened a long time ago, in the before times, when people still used to have fun with each other, and you never asked them who they voted for. Yes, I'm talking about the magical wonderland known as 2015, which I admit I spend a lot of time wishing I could time travel back to. This is a story of a Halloween costume party held in an old family mansion of a former friend of mine. There was a bunch of us college students there, and I don't know if my friend's parents knew that he was using their summer home in northern Wisconsin in such a fashion. Maybe they did, but I certainly didn't see anyone older than us on the property that night. I went as what I thought was Bullwinkle J. Moose from the old cartoon show, but several people informed me was merely a generic moose costume. It was not realistic, it was cartoony, and no human being would be confused into thinking I was anything but a college student. But the costume was furry, and it was somewhat warm that night, at least inside of the getup, so I was beginning to smell like some kind of a forest creature by the middle of the evening. Now, I was unaware in those days about furry culture, and I'm not going to get into any of that here, but the reason I encountered the Dogman that night was because of a girl that I later came to understand was into that whole furry thing. I thought she was flirting with me, but she later explained it had a lot to do with what she called my moose persona, and that I just called a costume I rented. We were both in the same place at the same time, but she was interpreting things one way, and I was interpreting them another. I thought she was interested in me, the guy inside the costume, but it was sort of more complicated on her end. At any rate, she's a very nice person and one of the few people at that party that night who I still keep in touch with. I mean no criticism of her or her lifestyle or her interests, but we were misunderstanding each other on that particular night. At any rate, she and I ended up sitting out behind the house under the somewhat bright moon. This was not on Halloween that year, but it was in the second half of October sometime, as I recall. Every time I tried to pull my sweaty old giant moose head off so I could see her better, the girl would put it back on me. Besides being hot inside there, it was kind of hard to see, so I was trying not to get too annoyed with her. I wasn't a Don Juan in school, so I didn't get walked out to the woods by girls all that often. I was quite excited, and the last thing I wanted to do was offend her. But at the same time, I wished she would let me take that nasty smelly headpiece off. And then suddenly she screamed bloody murder, and I looked all around, not understanding what was happening. Pulling at that moose head, I discovered that the girl had reattached it in some way. Something was tied to something else, and it was taking me longer than usual to get it off me. I couldn't hear her screaming any longer, and she didn't respond when I called to her, so I was pretty sure she had run away. This caused my heart to beat hard, and for my hands to shake. The harder I tried to get the moose head off, the longer it was taking. I started to hyperventilate, and I felt like I was gonna pass out. I remember finally lifting it up off my head and getting my first breath of air that didn't smell like sweat and beer. And then in the next split second, I remember seeing the beast man out of the corner of my eye. I was sitting there on a tree stump, as though offering myself up to an immense beast that walked on two legs and literally drooled all over its chest as it eyed me like I was a lobster dinner. It was some kind of a huge dog with its tongue hanging out, and yet it was some other kind of thing at the same time. Do you know the way your video thumbnails show that really broad-chested gray Dogman? Well, this one had that same kind of a chest. I'd say its fur was darker than gray, though. It was like a longer version of the fur of a black bear. but the epidermis under the fur was more of a dead zombie gray than the bright pink usually associated with black bear skin. Some people have suggested to me that what I really saw was a big black bear with a skin condition. And I am not a zoologist, so I can't tell you for certain. I do know that in that instant, I was not thinking that I was seeing a bear. No, this was a monster. It had the shoulders and the chest of a very large human being, and bears are just not built that way. Plus, you can't disregard the fact that it clearly had a canine head with big dog fangs, and that its tongue hung out as it breathed, dripping and pouring its dog saliva all over itself and the forest floor. I stood up and turned around, facing the beast, who I had to look up to as its bright eyeshine glared back down at me. I was 6 feet tall. I hit 6 feet when I was 18 or 19 and then just stopped growing, so I know that's how tall I was that night. Whatever this was, it was taller than me by at least 8 or 10 inches, probably more. The creature didn't seem at all confused by my presence. He didn't seem to care what kind of animal I was. He just seemed to be enjoying smelling my fear, and it looked as though he thought I'd make a tasty meal. Both of us were surprised by the sound of leaves and twigs breaking behind me, and the beast withdrew into the darkness of the woods so quickly. It was almost as though he had disappeared by magic. I whirled to find some complete jerks from one of my classes. They were clearly wasted, and they started in making fun of me and my costume right away. I did not fight back. I let them say whatever they wanted as I sidled past them and began walking back to the house across the big lawn that led to those woods. I remember them laughing at me, walking quickly away instead of defending myself from their insults. But I also remember just praying internally that I could get back in that old mansion before the Dogman decided to pursue me. I was starting to calm down as the house grew closer, and I was thinking of calling a cab to go home as soon as I got inside to safety. The next thing I knew, those rude boys were screaming like little girls and running past me into the house. Their voices were higher pitched than the girls had been, and I didn't have to guess twice about what must have scared them. That was the only time I've ever had any sort of cryptid experience, or ghost, or paranormal, or anything even slightly out of the ordinary. And the only reason it happened was because Dogman thought my moose costume was real. Don't go anywhere, because we've got another all-new Dogman story coming up right now. The Monster of Mount Forest. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a story for you that might be right up your alley. It's about a monster that I saw years ago, which I have no real explanation for. I have a few theories about it, sure, but theories are just guesses. At the time, I was living in Alameda Beach, and I was driving north and west towards Secord to go camping with a friend I was supposed to meet up there. The camping area I was heading toward was and is a forested area. Alameda Beach behind me was more or less the suburbs, still is. Sort of in the middle of the two is where I had my one and only ever cryptid experience. It's the suburbs over there, too, but it's got a lot more trees and fewer homes than Alameda. The creature I did eventually see that night was walking toward me. That means it was coming from the wooded area into the still fairly heavily wooded suburban area. In theory, it was walking toward Alameda Beach, although I sort of doubt that was where it ultimately was intending to go. This was not a creature that I would expect to see in a place that was even lightly populated with human beings. This was something that looked to me to belong to nature. It was shocking to see something like that even walking out onto a paved road. This was something that I'm sure no zoologist believes in the existence of. The fact that I was seeing it at all blew my mind, but since I was seeing it in a well-off suburb in Michigan, I knew that nobody would ever believe me. I mean, nobody in authority or power at least. No scientist, no cop, no media. If I told anyone what I saw, I'd be attacked and called names. I might get fired from my job even today. Worse, it might make me unemployable in my industry. I don't know why human beings would prefer to hire people who will lie and claim they have no controversial opinions or experiences when they could be hiring honest people. Nevertheless, it's hard to deny that this is how most people are for some reason. So I don't even know why I'm telling this story anonymously. I gain nothing from talking about stuff like this, and only bad can come to me if it gets out that I was the one who wrote this. I mean, it's not like anything I write or say will change someone's mind if they aren't predisposed to thinking that way before they even listen to me. I mean, I have no DNA evidence. I don't even have a blurry photograph. I just have a story. And a story is nothing more than something to repeat around a campfire or on a scary YouTube channel. So I might face ridicule or condemnation on the one hand, and I'm not going to change anybody's opinion on the other. I must be feeble-minded to even continue writing this email, and yet, here I go. So I had left that morning just as the first rays of the dawn came over the horizon. But already only a few minutes into my drive, the sky had darkened, and it began to look like it was gonna rain. This would have been in the early to mid-1990s. I'm gonna guess that it was 1994, but please don't quote me on that. I know I did not have a cell phone yet, and I got my first cell as a birthday present in 1996, so this had to have happened before that. I did have one of those old little snapshot cameras with me, but it was packed away in my backpack, which was in my back seat or my trunk. I was not planning on taking photos on the way to camping, so I had no easy access to my camera, which was nothing to shout about anyway. Probably the most I might have gotten with it in that dark day would have been a blurry blob squatch kind of a Dogman photo. Even so, it would be better than having nothing, which is what I currently have. This was a warm, muggy morning in the summer, but the Google Street View of that area was shot in the autumn back in 2008. It looks as blurry as any cryptid photo, and it's brightly lit. My reality was different though, so it was weirdly dark out, and the wind was whipping a little bit, when suddenly from out of the woods to my left and ahead, the creature ran out onto the road, heading at first right for the front end of my car. Now, I have a memory about the movements of the creature that is based on my gut-level instincts on that morning. To me, the creature had been intending to emerge from the woods and then run down the road in the direction I was coming from. It had not anticipated me driving my car toward him when he did so, however. And so both the creature and I were forced to reconsider our previous plans. I did have my headlights on in that darkness, and the animal man did walk directly into their glare. It held two clawed hands in front of its blinded eyes, and for a moment, I thought I was looking at a really big human being. I'm trying to think of what kinds of animals have hands besides people. Bears have paws with claws. This thing had hands like a man or an ape might have, but the claws at the end resembled something more like a badger than an ape. When the beast's eyes presumably got used to the light, it put its hands down and ran to my right as I swerved to my left. In that brief instant as we ran around each other and avoided a horrible crash, I saw the full form of this man-thing. It probably wasn't even a full second of time, but I clearly saw an upright, hairy man, with legs more like a dog or a cat. It was on two legs, it was not down on all fours, and yet it was neither a human nor a bear. It wasn't an ape either. Of that I can be 100% certain. I saw the crazed expression on the face of this canine, on top of the beast's neck, with that look that only a really surprised dog can have. I'm sure that if its eyes were not exhibiting such extreme eye shine, I might have seen the whites of its eyes. That's how widely they were open. This next part is harder for me to explain. If this situation had happened to me more recently, I don't think this next part would have happened at all. I'm pretty sure that if I narrowly avoided hitting a humanoid dog monster creature these days, I'd count my blessings if I didn't end up in a crash, and I'd hit the gas to get my behind the heck out of there. On that morning, however, the 20-something version of me did a crazy U-turn maneuver, almost crashing into the fence alongside the road that I didn't at first realize was guarding a cemetery. It's the St. Mary's Cemetery, judging from this sign here on Google Street View. A graveyard that fills up both sides of the road is over there. The Beastman had run out of the woods just past the end of the one cemetery to my left, and after I turned my car around, my headlights caught him leaping the chain link fence into the cemetery which had originally been on my right. At this point, I think I lost my mind. I kept trying to aim my headlights deep into the graveyard, and when he would move back into the darkness, I would put my wheels in reverse and move the car to a different angle. Sometimes I'd lose that dog-headed creature for a while, but his bright eye shine always gave him away in the dark. It wasn't until some guy drove by and stopped, asking me what I was doing, that I realized I looked ridiculous. My driving back and forth off the road had torn up some of the grass next to St. Mary's Cemetery, and I realized I was making a nuisance of myself. I explained to the guy in embarrassed terms that I thought I had seen some kind of a weird animal run into this cemetery, but it must have been my imagination. I was getting ready to drive the car away when the other driver pulled a high-powered flashlight out of his back seat and shone it into the graveyard, hitting the dog-headed man with it on his first try. What I thought I was seeing was that thing digging into the ground. I can't say for certain that I saw this, but that's sure what it looked like to me. The idea of that creature digging in a graveyard made me feel suddenly ill, and I really did not want to be there anymore. This other guy started screaming and ranting that he was looking at the Dogman, asking me to help him capture the monster or some completely crazy stuff like that. I realized what I must have looked like when I saw him freaking out. Even back then, my fear of loss of reputation overruled my curiosity about what that animal man really was. I'm afraid I tore out of there, leaving that other poor guy eating my dust. I know it was the wrong thing to do. I know it was a cowardly thing to do. I know. And yet, if I had this to do over, I'm 99% sure that I would have done the same thing. In fact, I might not have even tried to get a clear look at the monster. I might have just kept driving and never slowed down in the first place. You know, now that I think about it, I did see something weird about 5 or 6 years ago, but this time I was driving some miles further north of that original sighting. It might have been a bear. It might have been a person wearing a dark outfit. Might have been a Bigfoot. Or it might have been someone cosplaying as a werewolf. I don't know what it was, and a big reason for that is that when I saw the thing moving through the trees alongside the highway, I floored the gas pedal, and I never looked back. Nothing good can come from seeing a man-sized or larger cryptid. Unless you're Jeff Meldrum or unless you have a self-destructive streak, it makes very little sense to stop and examine any possible cryptids you may come across. I should know, because I personally witnessed the monster of Mount Forest. CS is the best. You've heard me confess. Each day that we know her, we feel much more blessed. Please join us in thanking CS, who quite literally makes life more livable for us here. Sometimes we say that our executive producers make our episodes possible, and I have to say that with CS, we often mean that in a very literal fashion. CS is one of our supporters who have donated to us recently through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 direct donations page, and that was how we were able to get the food and supplies we needed to survive our recent bout with the Wuhan flu. Last night was the first night that things tasted like food again instead of yuck. And I'm telling you, with each bite of deliciousness, I thanked CS once again. That's the truth. The same is true for Godzilla Tim in Northern Ireland, UK. These two fine people are fueling each new episode that we're creating lately. If you'd like to elevate your level of importance to being regarded as one of the great human beings like CS, then listen to our international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman as he explains the deets. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.